All right, guys, welcome back to the Nexus of Geek. This is Ariel, and today I wanted to make a story time video, sort of half and half. Today is a sad day for Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans. As you may or may not know, Michelle Tratchtenberg, who was sadly an actress with a pretty good credential, including playing the iconic role of Dawn Summers, which was Buffy Summers' sister in the iconic TV series from the 90s. And she was also on Gossip Girl and a number of popular movie projects. And I thought I was pretty shocked hearing that she passed away unexpectedly earlier today. The news broke that they found her dead in her apartment and in New York. There is still some. There's an investigation going on. Of course, when something happens, there's no foul play involved. But until we know better, they're talking about maybe complications from a liver transplant, which she had as a procedure recently, and also as a result, or maybe a separate health issue, which was cardiac arrest. But whatever the case, we'll find out in a couple of days. And it's really. It's a sad news for me as a Buffy fan. I love the show. I love the series. And I thought that I would do a story time video here and talk about why I think the show is special, and it's always going to be special to me. The characters are just so well-rounded, so well-written, and I know that in recent years there has been controversy with showrunner and creator Joss Whedon. He kind of pretty much got blacklisted and canceled because he was a pretty toxic guy by all accounts behind the scenes, even though we were enjoying the end result and all the 7 seasons that the program was on, including 5 seasons of its spin-off series Angel. So we had a lot of content to enjoy, and not to mention other series. But be that as it may, he got canceled because of the way he handled actresses and talent behind the scenes, not only on Buffy but other projects. But I found this article that was written, published almost 2 years ago, talking about how, from Screen Rant, and how it says that it's time to admit that Dawn, who happened to be on the show for only the last 2 seasons, made Buffy the Vampire Slayer better. And that's a pretty bold prediction because Buffy, I think, was really good. I think the Nexus, or for me, the highlight of the show was probably the 3rd season. Although the 5th season, for me, like seasons 5 and 6 were really also very good. And so season 5 especially, which is when this character was introduced. And Alex Keenan, the author, says that while Dawn Summers, Michelle Tratchtenberg, was not the most popular character on Buffy, her presence was still good for the show overall. So I know that well, let's keep reading. Part of the reason the Supernatural series was so strong was not only because of its action and engaging monsters, but because of its ability to explore complex personal relationships, whether they were platonic, romantic, or familiar. And this is true. Dawn first arrives in the show, season 5, as Buffy's sister. But if you've seen the show, if you haven't seen the show, I'm not gonna spoil how she appears, and there's a whole mystery of her existence in the first place, and I think it was really well written and really well done. And you can read this article if it's online if you want to. Yeah, but beware, if you haven't seen the show and you plan to in the future, there's a lot of spoilers here, so I don't really want to spoil some of the events that happen on season 5. But I use this as a framework for my story, where I think a series can go on for a long time and has to reinvent itself, just like anything else, to stay relevant, to stay fresh. And I started to say that Buffy made an impact. I was 27 years old when I first watched the show, so I was not necessarily the key demographic for this show, for sure. It was aimed at more younger audiences because the first couple of seasons on the WB network, which later became the CW, was more geared towards young adults. The show was set in high school age, which was a pretty common TV trope at the time. And then around the fourth season, all the characters grew up and went to college, and so they reinvented the series once again. But it's interesting that they talk about the cousin Oliver factor in Hollywood, and usually that's a bad thing. Or they talk about show jumping the shark. I don't think Buffy ever jumped the shark. I think it was really good. You might argue that some seasons were a lot better than others, and I know that season 7, the final season, was not to everybody's liking. Same for season 4. It's not a fan favorite, but I don't think the show ever jumped the shark, meaning lost any quality in terms of writing or in terms of storytelling or definitely in terms of acting. And I think Michelle portrayal of Buffy's sister Dawn was then a big part of that in the later seasons. I think she did an amazing job of portraying this character who was previously not there and who had to gel with the other actors and the dynamics that had already been established by the show. So that's a win. That was a win for the show. So it was not, when they talk about the cousin Oliver effect, they talk about how that is a term used, dates back to the 60s. Or the early 70s. So whenever the Brady Bunch was on, I think it was late 60s, early 70s. And the Brady Bunch was plugging along, and they inserted a new character in the latter seasons of the show to try to revitalize the show and give it more of a fresh content. And the character's name was Cousin Oliver, and he had never been there before, and I think it had the opposite effect where people really were turned off by the character. Now, some people didn't like the Dawn Summers character, I will acknowledge that, but I think she kind of grew on the audience because Michelle's performance was so good and so on the spot. Part of it was your typical stock teenage girl that was pretty common trope on TV and other media. So that part of it is not exactly what was exceptional about it. What was exceptional, I think, was the energy, the creativity, and making the role her own. And you might say that I'm biased because Buffy is one of my favorite shows, if not my favorite show of all time. But I really think that if it hadn't been for some of the daring changes that they made in the last three seasons of the show, including introducing the Dawn Summers character, that it would have been more of the same and maybe not as memorable as it was. So the show definitely, the writers as well as producers, definitely took a lot of chances, but it paid off in my estimation of the end result. And you could definitely say that because a lot of people point to season 5, which is when the character was first introduced, as one of their, if not their favorite season, one of the best seasons of the show. Now there were other elements for sure, but Dawn was a big part of the series then. I went on to watch another show on the CW or the WB network back then that was also not. It was out of my element and out of my comfort zone. Buffy was more supernatural sci-fi elements. It's in the name, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But Gossip Girl was more a teenage high school drama show, but it's still a well-written show. If you watch that series, it still holds up. There's still a lot of good characters and drama. Yeah, it's kind of formulaic in some areas. But I think, again, Michelle did a great job of having a breakthrough character in the way that she's inserts herself into the series that already had an established cast, had already had an established narrative, and was really already had developed a fandom and a fan base. And the Buffy fan base, for sure, is one of the strongest online, and always has been. Gossip Girl was pretty up there, product of its time in the mid or late 90s or even early 2000s. I think it was early 2000s. Can't remember off the top of my head. But she was an exceptional talent, and losing her at age 39, it kind of makes me sad, and it just reminds me that of what an impact she had I will do some other Buffy videos in the future. I don't have a Buffy reaction because I've seen the series multiple times. I think I've seen it all the way through like 2 or 3 times, to the point that I know the characters, I know the dialogue, and so my reactions would not be so great. I did have a Buffy a Buffy book club on this channel a while back, and I stopped reading, and so maybe I'll bring that back as a feature if enough of you want to see that. But I think that's all I have to say. To interject a few, this is supposed to be a personal story too, and my personal story is that Tuesday nights. I know Buffy debuted on the WB on Monday nights, and I didn't really see the first half season. I was Johnny come lately and late to the party. I caught an episode here and there. I thought it was intriguing, but I didn't really become a fan until summer of 1997-ish. 96 or whenever that first season had its summer reruns, because the way traditional TV worked back then, it was like you would have a 22 run episode season, which is a lot of episodes for people that grew up later in the Netflix streaming era, where series tend to be have 10 or 12 episodes, 8 to 12 episodes a season. So 22 episodes was the standard for a drama back in the day. So that's a lot of TV and a lot of content. And what would happen is they would show all these new episodes, and then there would be like a mid-season, like around episode 11 or 12, and they would reserve like big events for that. And then you would get into the summer season if it was a fall show, and then you would have nothing for reruns or repeated episodes. But back then we didn't have, unless you had a DVR or were taping the show, which I started doing afterwards when I became a big fan. You didn't have a way to if you missed an episode and you didn't record it, you didn't have a way. You had to wait all the way until they had a repeat season, like in the summer and in the usually Christmas time, Thanksgiving, around that time, when they had other programming that they didn't want to compete with. But I will always have fond memories of running. Buffy was the only show, or the first show, that I remember that I would actually run home. I would get off the bus. I wasn't driving to work back then. I would get off the bus and I would run, sometimes literally run, just to get home in time to be in front of the TV to watch the latest episode. And I after a while, I never missed them. So it has a special place always, for sure. And if you have watched it all the way through, or if you it's in the top 100 shows of TV of all time by TV Guide for a reason. It has had so much influence on other shows that came afterwards. And again, I wanted to tell a story and pay my respects to the superb acting, and it's really tough that we lost Michelle at such an early age. It's a bummer because we've been talking about having a reboot and having a updated version of the show. So I know that when that happens, sometimes the actors from the original show make a cameo appearance, and unfortunately, unless they do something with the technology, we won't have a live appearance by Michelle. So that's a bummer. But may she rest in peace, and thank you for all the hours of entertainment that you gave us through your many roles.